Yeah. So there are a couple of ways of seeing this idea of your personality being shaped by other people's personalities. There's the positive way of what Haley just mentioned. Okay. So in other words, we almost say it's like reciprocal, perhaps. In other words, you're doing things and then people are doing things and you're kind of like responding to each other. Do any of you guys have a friend that like, you're both like, you're not really funny, but together you're hilarious? You play off of each other, and then there's always, hopefully there's one of you who always goes a little bit too far, and then that person laughs and says, like, oh, too far, but then they pick it up from there and they continue anyway. So we might say that you can be shaped by reciprocity. Reciprocity, in other words, reciprocal, you're kind of going back and forth. Yes. And of course, another way that we can be shaped by people around us is also what?
Judgment?
Yeah. How do you mean that? You're right, but how do you mean that?
You think this you don't think how you would as opposed to if you're alone because you're scared of thinking the wrong thing and then it backfired on you.
What's the word? There's a word for this. I've written part of it on the board. You could play hangman.
Conscious. Confident.
Conformity.
Confrontation. Oh my god.
Said it.
Conformity.
Conformity, yes. Conformity. Yes. You conform. And that's largely in one direction. Conformity is largely in one direction. Unless you're the person who's putting forth the pressure to get other people to conform. So conformity is usually one way. And then I guess maybe there's kind of a third way as well, which we all kind of intuitively know, but I don't know that we would necessarily find it. Osmosis. In other words, just kind of being around people, you're going to take in things. So for example, you grew up in the family that you grew up in, and you'll pick up the mannerisms. You'll pick up the mannerisms. A friend of mine has a daughter. She's 17 now, and if I watch her mannerisms are a lot like her mom's. She picks up, and she's almost like a little version. Well, I guess not so little anymore. A little version of that person. Yeah, so we kind of pick up these things. We pick them up either socially, through the environment. You know what I'm talking about. It's her. You pick them up through the environment. Just kind of being around other people, or you pick them up like being in the environment in terms of like larger society. You learn how to behave, and a lot of times, people say like, oh, you're just doing things because because that's what everybody else does. There's nothing wrong with that. You like to eat, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, but oh my God, you eat? Dude, everybody eats. Oh my God, you're such a conformist. Conformity might be a bad thing. Well, we'll figure it out. It might be a good thing. But this osmosis thing, that's kind of how you learn to live. You learn how to walk. I don't think any baby just kind of lays there and then stands up and says, time to walk. We actually know that they don't, because back, as I refer to it as the golden age of psychology, before they had ethics and morals about that stuff, and they just said, I wonder if we can get people to fill in the blank, and then they just did horrible stuff to human beings. Anyway, we have these studies in which there were kids who were like raised in a room by themselves, never really interacted with the world around them, and a marvelous thing happens. They don't develop speech. So that tells us something, that speech is learned by people around us. And you might be like, well, that's horrible. They did this to children? Yes. But now we know some things because of it. With the speech patterns, grammar, and if you then take that child out of the room at the age of 7, yes, 7, that's how long this thing went on, and we discovered that the kid never really learns language fully. In other words, all that language development happens in the first few years, which means that your little niece, nephew, brother, sister, cousin, or whatever, and you're like, and that kid's like looking at you. The kid is learning language from you. And that kid is now trying to make sense of, and after that person who holds the child, and you're like, so, what are we going to feed you today? I have an idea. Why don't we feed you steak and cheesecake? Well, that's silly, of course. You can't eat cheesecake or steak because you have no teeth. You're searching for teeth. Now that child is learning that child's learning that that's what language sounds like. They're learning monotone maybe. They're learning speech patterns and rhythms. If you ever want to mess with yourself in your head, listen to yourself talk. Or listen to another person talk. But listen intentionally. And what you're going to notice is that there's a natural music to language. There are accents on words that you just kind of know that they're supposed to be there. There are certain words that you just read slowly or speak slowly, higher, lower. But in all of it, you're going to find that there's this rhythm and pattern. And that's because language is constructed this way. Naturally, we don't mean to do it. Like we've mentioned before, when you read poetry, for example, you'll notice that there's meter and rhyme and all these things. And you can get through a whole poem and never even realize that every single line in that poem has the exact same number of syllables. It was constructed this way intentionally, but you won't notice it because it still just sounds natural to us, because that's how we talk. We learn those speech patterns before the age of 5, largely. But early on, I mean, even in the womb, we understand that those parts of the brain that process language are lighting up. Kids learn language very early on. So the best thing that you can do for a child is to let them hear lots and lots and lots of words. And I really mean that. The best thing that you can do, even better than feeding them, is teach them language, because then they may grow up to study English literature and be marvelous human beings. Maybe giving them food and water is more important than that. But outside of that, your verbal acuity, your ability to construct language, make sense of it, is one of your highest predictors of success in your life. And so the more language that you hear when you're a little kid, the better your verbal skills are going to be. There are people who, I don't know if any of you guys know, like little kids that are like 5, but they're going on like 50. You know, they carry themselves very differently, very seriously and everything. And then there are those little kids who are like, they're like running around, like running their heads into walls, and you're like, something is different about these two specimens. A lot of it is going to be language. Just telling you that yesterday, this little kid walks up to me, and she's like 8 years old in my jiu-jitsu class afterwards, and she takes my sleeve and she looks at me very seriously. She just goes, "Coach, are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, might be a lie." She's like, "You're dying." Very seriously, and I said, "I know." And she's like, "You're okay?" I said, "I'm okay. I'm okay." She's like, "Okay." And she seems like relieved the fact that I know that I'm dying and I'm okay with that. So if anything happens to me, it's an 8-year-old at the gym named Maite. It was her. She did it. So go take her out for me. This is from Scanlon. But he's dead. So we learn language by osmosis. We learn culture by osmosis. We learn how to behave by osmosis. Just kind of picking up things around us. And if we didn't have that, we couldn't exist at all, period. And then there's this other thing here. Actually, we'll go with reciprocity also. That we shape people and people shape us. And this is kind of like this idea that iron sharpens iron. You should have people around you who challenge you. If you're looking, for example, for like a significant other, a mate, someone to spend to build your life with, not just hang out with, but to build your life with, you're looking for something like this. You want somebody who's going to challenge you a bit. And you don't want to be over the top. You don't want to just be like, "I like cheesecake." And, "Oh, you like cheesecake? Well, cheesecake sucks, and so do you." You don't want that kind of like somebody who's always arguing with you about everything, and like you have to defend even while you're getting up in the morning. Which, if you're around a person like that, it might not be easy to defend getting up in the morning. But you may have to, you don't want someone who challenges you on every little point, but you want someone who's willing and able to stand up to you and challenge you on certain points and have discussions. Not necessarily fights, but discussions back and forth, because your perspective is not always going to be 100% clear. You need to have someone around you who can advise you and interact with you at this level. So you want someone who's going to sharpen you. And this is, you want this from your friends as well. You don't want your friends who just always say, "Yes, yes, 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 yes." Oh, what movie was it? What was it? Joy Luck Club? Have you ever seen the movie Joy Luck Club? I've seen like one scene from it, and it's the only thing I should remember from it. It's a woman and her husband, and she's very passive, and he's very wealthy, I think he is, and very powerful. And he comes home and he's very tired, and he's asking her questions. And he's like, "What do you want for dinner?" And she's very chipper and bright. "Whatever you want for dinner." "Well, what do you want? What do you want?" "Well, whatever you want. I'm fine with anything." And everything he's asking, he's realizing that all of his interactions with her, she's always just affirming, "Whatever you want, whatever you want, whatever you want." Sometimes what you want is what you don't realize that you need. And sometimes the things that you want are the things you don't even realize that you want. And so sometimes what you need is someone to kind of push back against you a little bit, because if you don't, you become weak. You do push-ups. Notice how, when I'm doing push-ups, am I doing them like this? Someone tell me no. Because I'm pushing on the air. I'm not getting any stronger. Instead, I'm trying to push the planet down. And that is what gets you stronger. It's that tension, that pushback that you're getting. This is what makes your ideas stronger. This is what makes your relationship stronger. A little bit of pushback. And, again, I'll say it again, iron sharpens iron. We get stronger by this. And you want that in your relationships. Somebody who makes you better. This does not make me better. Pushing against the earth makes me better. You want somebody who actually makes you better. Someone once told me that that's how you know who you're in love with, the person who makes you better. That's how you know who the one is. And then there's this dangerous one, which is conformity. And this is the one that most people probably think of when they say that we're shaped by things around us. We're shaped. And what that means is there are things that you want to say, but you're not going to say them. Because if you do say them, then you're going to be out of step with everybody else. There are things that you think that you're going to be afraid to think because nobody else thinks that. And there are going to be things that you're going to want to do, but you're not going to do them because of this. That's not what society lets me do. Even like there's certain jokes, certain humor, certain things that we're afraid, well, I can't think that joke. I certainly can't say that joke because then I'm going to, I'm going to be rejected by society. I'm going to be condemned. We understand what I'm saying here by this. And that's what this really is. Now, there's certain things that conformity, not so bad. Not so bad. If you're sitting there right now and you're like, I hear you, Scattered. Man, I just want to kill. I just want to kill. I want to see the blood. Don't. Conform in this case, because there are things that are better for you. And simply doing whatever you want is not necessarily what's good for you. In fact, I'm going to rephrase that. Doing whatever you want is probably not good for you. I keep mentioning cheesecake. I don't know why, but I wonder how many of us would rather eat cheesecake than vegetables. But vegetables are good? Yeah, I certainly would. And so if you end up eating cheesecake instead of vegetables your whole life, you end up looking like this, and you don't want that to happen. I don't wish that on any of you. And yeah, and eventually you end up dying. You're sitting there and you go to the doctor's office and you're like, I feel great. The doctor says, well, inside, and he holds your sleeve and says, you're dying. Because he can see something inside of you that you can't see inside of yourself. That's what they said with this kid I was laughing about, because when she's sitting there very seriously, I'm like imagining, what is she see? Is there a demon behind me? The sword. And she's like, you're dying. Oh, am I really? And I'm completely oblivious to what's happening behind me, maybe. Sometimes we're completely oblivious to what's happening inside of us. And the truth of the matter is that most of us are completely oblivious to what's happening inside of most other people. And most of us are oblivious to what's happening inside of ourselves, even up here. But the doctor can see certain things, like a lifetime of cheesecake choices, that we can't necessarily see ourselves. And then one day, you're diagnosed, and that's that. And that's something that's going to happen to most of us. And so, keep that in mind as we do this. Because there are things that you think. There are things that you say, things that you do. But here's the trick. None of this exists. None of this exists. And if this is you, in other words, if this is what you are, right? You are the things that you think, the things that you say, the things that you do. So if you never think them, if you never say them, and you never do them, then guess what? You also don't exist. I'll say that again. You also then don't exist. What exists is some kind of an approximation of you. Like maybe you're not going to say certain things that you're thinking, and you're not going to do other things. So that means that you're really just kind of like this amalgamation of other people and other ideas, and that's what ends up entering the world. This is the thing that comes into existence. This is the thing that comes to be. And being in existence these are really complicated concepts, things that I'll save for another time, probably another year. But unless you say the things that you're thinking, unless you think the things that you want to think, unless you do the things you want to do, then this version of you never comes into existence. And by the way, this is a quite literal thing as well. When you say things, you're speaking out into the world. That creates sound waves. Before you think, before you say something, it only exists up here. It doesn't. It exists in the world in a hidden sense, only because you are physically in the world. But once you speak something, you now create something. Literally, you create something. It's no surprise that like most religious texts begin this way. And many of you are Christian. It begins at the very beginning. In the beginning was in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was that form and void. And how does He do it? He just says, "Let it be. Let there be light. Let there be this. Let there be that." Speech has the power to create and to bring into existence. When you speak something, it's not a small thing. You speak it, and then, like I said, the sound waves enter the world physically now. Your ideas are now physically in the world. Well, now all that's left for you to do is to do it. You've already brought it into being. You might as well see it through now. Whatever your ideals are. But if you're not doing this, then what you're doing is you're living the life of someone else. You will never even exist, not even this amalgamated version of you. But instead, it's going to be some other version. And this is what happens when people get to at some point in their life and they say, "Oh my God, who am I? I don't even know who I am." You know? And then that's exactly why. You don't know who you are. Because after a lifetime of telling lies and bringing those lies into existence, thinking things you don't really think, saying things you don't really mean, doing things you aren't really authentic, you've done so much to bring this character into life that you have no idea what it is to even be. And that means that you simply don't exist. And this is why people will start to feel like they don't matter. Because you don't exist. What do you mean you don't matter? There is no you. You're the thing that gave up this arm and this leg in order to conform. And again, sometimes that's a fine thing. You know, again, if you're a genocidal maniac, I'd rather you not do that. You know, I'd rather you I'll tolerate you thinking it, I'll tolerate you saying it, but I can't tolerate you doing it, though. Because that is going to have a significant impact, of course, on people who have nothing to do with you. But that's the dangerous one, conformity. Conformity. Because we can convince ourselves so easily, because conformity is comfortable. I mean, God, if everybody thinks a certain thing and you don't, it's just so much easier to go along. You know, just go along. Don't argue. You know, first it starts like this. I'm not going to say anything. Everybody in the room feels a certain way. I'm not going to say anything. And then you start to just kind of adopt it almost as your own mode of thinking. But I don't know if this is clear, but I don't know if I can make it any clearer. It's a difficult concept. But that unless you fulfill this, then you never come into being. You're never really born. In fact, I'll leave it at that. You're never really born, which is a terrible thing. Because guess what's going to happen if you do this? And guess what's going to happen if you do this? Take a guess. You've learned nothing from me this year. Of course you're going to suffer. And guess what's going to happen if you think, say, and act authentically? One guess. You're going to suffer. Thank you. Here we go. Because no matter what you do in life, you're going to suffer. Because life is suffering. You don't get to choose not to suffer. But hopefully this is more clear now than it was 36 weeks ago when I first told you this. You now get to choose what you're going to suffer for. Are you going to suffer for being authentic? Are you going to suffer for things that you don't actually say, think, or feel? Are you going to suffer for someone for pretending to be something completely different from what you are? You're going to suffer in any of those circumstances. Have you ever been accused of something that you didn't actually do? Have you ever gotten in trouble for something you didn't actually do? I dare say 100% of the time I've gotten in trouble is for stuff I didn't do. And we've all gotten in trouble for things that we didn't do. And isn't that almost worse? You're like, man. And sometimes you can understand it. There were a couple of years ago, when I was in the building over here, my students were just, they were doing what my students do. They were out causing mischief. And then it's difficult for me to say, hey, mischief, mischief, mischief. And then they go and they cause mischief. I say, don't do that. And they're like, Scanlon, you said mischief. I'm like, I also said to do your homework. But, you know, for some reason that didn't translate into action. And there was this one day where they came to my room and they had a case of soda, Diet Coke. And they go, here, just down, boom, for you. And I'm like, thanks, but wait, where'd you get this? And they're like, for you. No, I didn't ask you what it's for. I asked you, where'd you get this? And they're like, down the hall. And they start to walk away. I'm like, well, from who, though? You can't just go jack people's stuff. And they go, mischief. And I'm like, man. So it turns out that they stole the Diet Cokes from the instructor's lounge, and they got caught doing it. And they did the yeah. And they didn't just get caught doing it. They put my name into it. Where are you going? It was Scanlon. So I'm like, oh, come on, dude. Now they're going to think I put you up to this. So the period was over. I have the soda, and I'm taking it down the hallway to take it back. And I hear someone go, Scanlon, you going to pay for those Diet Cokes? And I turn around, and it's the person who they stole the Diet Cokes from. And I start laughing. I'm like, because I've done this person for a number of years. And I'm laughing. I go, look, man, you're not going to believe this. But I did not put them up to it. And she's laughing, and she's like, hey, man, you need some Diet Cokes? And I go, no, but it didn't actually. What can I say? You know, I've been in, you do so much, you know, you have that reputation for long, it's impossible to talk your way out of it at that point. Sometimes this is what happens, and I genuinely couldn't do anything except for laugh at this person who's very angry. And not laugh at them, but laugh because of this person. And I just said, I get it, you know, it's gonna, no matter what I say, it's not gonna be believable. And sometimes in your life, maybe you'll get into trouble for something that you didn't actually do. And maybe you'll understand why. It's like, I get it. You know, because maybe I didn't do this one thing, but I sure did these other 52 million things. And then the one time they catch you. But for some reason, the suffering that we don't deserve feels way worse than the suffering that we do deserve. And so, if you're going to suffer for this, it's going to be really difficult to bear. And if you're going to suffer for this, it's going to be very difficult to bear. You're going to suffer for this. Oh, well, now you have a choice. You have a choice. You can take some kind of comfort in knowing that you're suffering for something real, something for who you are. And if you have that why, you can find the how. I can get through this. Why? Because at the very least, at least I'm suffering for something real, suffering authentically. The last thing you want to do is suffer for something that's not real, something that isn't, you know, that's a fiction, something that's a lie. You don't want to suffer for a lie. But you don't get to choose not to suffer. Maybe if you at least choose authenticity, you can suffer for something that's authentic, something that's real. Suffer for who you really are. Because then a strange thing is going to happen. If you go through it and you get strengthened by it, the thing that's getting strengthened is you. That's what's getting bolstered and strengthened. Not some fictional version of you, not some conformist view that's not really real, but the actual real you. And we recognize some of these people in life. We do. I'll let you piece it together, but these are people who we tremendously admire. Yeah. I mean, I'll leave it at that. And so the purification of the soul is to allow it to be alone. Sometimes this is what has to happen to be able to become who you really are. You have to separate yourself from this process. Because with reciprocity, what's happening is you're giving something, you're getting something, and you're just kind of being built up into what you already are. If you're conforming, you're building into something that you're not. And if you're learning from osmosis, you're developing, you're getting pieces of parts of everybody else and putting them into yourself. But this is because you're around people. The way that you actually become entirely your own in yourself is that. See it?
Nothing.
Okay. So I guess we better fill it up. What am I going to be?
Funny.
Yeah, I'm going to be funny. I finally realized why I laugh at my own jokes. It took me a long time. I finally realized why I laugh at my own jokes. It's because I'm really funny. I'm going to be, I don't know, whatever it's going to be. You haven't written your list yet. Maybe you have. Some of you have, perhaps. I would encourage you that this is one of the best things in life that you could be. So maybe we can start with that. You know, that'd be your homework for the weekend. Go be funny. Go learn to be funny. Whatever it is, you know? And this is nice. Maybe I should have done this backward. Maybe I should have this underneath this as a visual, because you can understand that this is the foundation, the basis of who you are. And so this whole think, say, do thing is going to be from this. So now what are you choosing to be? But you can only do this when you separate yourself from the world. And that takes many forms. For some of you, that might just be walking around a trail somewhere nearby. For some of you, that might, you can't get to a trail. So maybe for you, it's just sitting at the top of the stairs over at Kimball. Maybe just walking around the park. For some of you, maybe it's going out into the forest, going out to the woods. Some of you may be going to a mountaintop. And those are the best places to go. High places from which we can slow the world, if you remember. But the purification of the soul only happens when we keep no company. So sometimes in life, you have to separate yourself from the world to become. To become. Otherwise, there'll always be things. Questions? Comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques?
Did you see at the top of that?
A lot. Stop me if I've mentioned this before. Any of you guys ever go to Cowles Mountain? Show anybody been up there? Okay, you guys know what it is, at least. It's a high peak here in San Diego. Essentially, if you ever go to Cowles Mountain, depending on when you go, it can be crowded or it can be, lightly popular. Let's say you go on a crowded day. Let's say you go on a crowded summer day. Because that's when people start to go. That's when people kind of decide new year, new me, or a new season, new me. So they start to hike Cowles Mountain. And it's a pretty steep trail, but again, there are a lot of people who go on it. If you're going over there, let's say that you go on a certain day and there's road construction, and all of a sudden you're jammed up in traffic because of the road construction, all the people who are going there, and maybe your air conditioning isn't working so well, so it's hot, and you're going there and you're just like, oh my God, I'm doing this just to go walk up a steep mountain and stand up in the sun. I think it's really frustrating because as you're doing that, there's an old woman with a walker who's going down the sidewalk, and she's passing you up as you're sitting there in traffic. And so you're trying to get over, but somebody is trying to jam you up, and they don't want to let you over because they're frustrated too, and they finally get over. And then you go and you try to look for parking, but there's very little parking there. There's a lot of parking, so there's also a lot of people. So all the way down the street, you end up having to park what feels like a mile away, but who knows how far it actually is. So you're having to walk up this hill so that you can go to a hill to walk up the hill. And then you finally get over there, and it's dusty, it's dirty, it's hot, there's lots of sun, very little shade on this trail. And so you start walking up the hill, and you're trudging, you're dragging yourself up there, and then finally when you get to the top, this weird thing happens. You get up and you go, maybe you take a picture of yourself with the sign, maybe you stand over there at the edge, and you look out over the city, and this really weird thing happens. You look at that traffic jam that you were just in 45 minutes ago, and you look and you go, that's not so bad. It makes sense from up here. You can see where the cars are coming through. There's almost like a music to it, where there are lanes, and the cars don't seem so jammed up as they seemed down before. You can't hear the honking. You're not cussing anybody. No one's cussing you out. And you can stand at this high place and just look and go, it looks so peaceful from up here. It's like any kind of you go to a skyscraper, a big building, and you look over the edge and you see all the cars and people. Everyone looks like little ants, but it looks like everyone's going about their business in a respectful, meaningful way. When you go down into it, it's chaos. But when you separate yourself from it, now you can see the order and the pattern to it all, if this makes sense. And so maybe that this is part of life, is being able to step back from the chaos of our lives and see the pattern and form and music of it, even. And then all of a sudden, things will start to make more sense to us. Oh, okay. It's no coincidence that nearly every religion starts with somebody going up to a high place, going up to a mountaintop. Moses goes up into a mountaintop, and he comes back, and he's forever changed. They said that he's glowing, his beard is white, and the people of Israel are looking at him like, what did you encounter up there? And what he encountered was the Almighty. There's no surprise that Muhammad goes up into a mountaintop, and he's up there for a number of years, and he encounters an archangel who says, I'm going to give you a revelation that's going to change the world. And Muhammad's like, I can't write, I'm illiterate. He's like, no problem, I got you. There's also no surprise that Zarathustra goes up into a mountaintop, and he's there for 7 years. He encountered no gods up there, but he did encounter something almost as powerful, which is himself. And he descends the mountaintop, and he's confronted by a monk who tells him, who says to him, wow, I recognize the form of you, but the features have changed. Who are you? He says, you're Zarathustra. You passed this way 7 years ago, didn't you? And he says, oh yeah. And the monk asks him, where are you headed? He says, I've gained some wisdom. I'm going back now to share it with the people. And the monk laughs and says, nah, the only thing worthwhile to do with your wisdom is to share it with God, because the people are going to reject it. It's going to frustrate you. And Zarathustra's like, I know better. And he walks down the mountaintop. And in his first interaction with people, he immediately becomes frustrated, because he learns the true nature of people who seek wisdom and people who don't. He walks out to a marketplace, and there are people out there all gathered. He said, this is the perfect place for me to start telling people about ultimate reality. And he gets up and he talks about the Superman, the individual who stands above social and moral judgments to be entirely 100 completely authentic. And then he describes this other person, the last man, the person who seeks comfort and conformity and only wants to be free from the suffering of life. And then the crowd starts to cheer, and they go, yeah, give us the last man. Because they're not listening to a word he's saying. Turns out he's standing there and looks up and he sees a tightrope going across the buildings. They're all gathered there because there's going to be a tightrope walker who's going to be walking by. They weren't gathered for him. They weren't gathered for anything except for to see the show. So they thought he was the hype man, going up there and talking to the crowd. So then, as they all start cheering for the thing they're not supposed to cheer for, the tightrope walker thinks it's for him. So he walks out there, and they all start cheering, because he thinks his hype man's finished hyping him up. And then he falls to his death. He dies. And the crowd looks at him and is like, well, this show sucked. And they walk away. And this guy, whose whole thing was to serve the crowd, he dies alone. Oh, well, alone except for Zarathustra, who goes to him and helps him to close his eyes. Sometimes when you're in these high places, you're looking for the wrong things, and you fall down and you end up worse than you started. This was the case with Siddhartha. He goes up to a mountaintop, and he's going there for wisdom. But he doesn't have heart to receive it. He's up there for 3.5 years. He comes back down. He's like, I'm no better for this. And then he goes and sits underneath a tree, and he contemplates his time on the mountaintop. And then he receives wisdom. Because it isn't just going to a high place. It's being in a place that you're ready to receive what it is that you're being given. It's like people will say, oh man, I wish I knew then what I know now. People in their 40s be like, man, I wish I knew now what I knew. I wish I knew when I was 20 what I know now. You couldn't have. You weren't ready to receive it. You have to be ready to receive it. They say that when the student is ready, the master appears. When the student is ready, the master appears. Everything I'm telling you right now is either going to go in one ear and out the other if you're not ready to receive it. That's okay. I never think that more than one or two of you are ever really listening at any given time. I think most of you are probably thinking about something else. But that's okay, because it's going into your unconscious. And then someday, some of you are going to be somewhere, I don't know, maybe you'll be in a college class, maybe not, maybe you'll just be walking through life, and someone's going to say something like, the purification of the soul is to simply to allow it to be alone. You're like, how come nobody ever told me that? But it's going to seem strangely familiar to you, and strangely comfortable to you. And that's because you have encountered it before. You just don't remember it necessarily. And then that person who comes along and tells you that, you're going to credit them with changing your life. And I'll still be here grading essays. But that's okay. Because there will be lots of things in life like that. There are things that your parents tell you constantly. But if one of your friends comes along and says it, you're going to buy into it 100%. That's fine. There's stuff that I could be telling you constantly. And then if Cardi B tweets it out, you'll be like, there's wisdom. I wish that person was a teacher. That's okay, as long as you learn. The point of all this is not to get credit for anything. The point of this is to be, to exist. That's all. So high places give you an opportunity to do that. They separate you. They allow you to slow the world down. You're no longer living in the midst of all the chaos and the noise. And it gives you time to reflect and contemplate, if you're ready to receive it. If you're ready to receive it. So a couple of lessons there. Separate yourself once in a while. Good for you. It's good for yourself. Be ready to receive whatever wisdom meets you there. And don't come down and try to force it on anybody who isn't willing to receive it. You're going to frustrate them, you're going to frustrate yourself. Others?
How do you become ready?
I don't know. How do you become ready? I don't know. I'll let you know if I'm ever ready. When you're ready to receive it? Yeah, you know. You know. How do you receive information? I was talking to someone last night, former student actually, who was telling me that his dad always tries to tell him, man, when you were, he's only 21 by the way, and his dad's always telling him, man, a few years ago, you were, and he talked about all the great things that he was a few years ago. And he tells his dad, I don't want to hear it. He's not ready to receive it. He's not ready to receive it. Is it true that a few years ago he was far more energetic and open to ideas and open to experience and ready to take on the world? Yes. But right now at 21, he's completely closed-minded because he's like, I'm trying to hear that. I'm like, I hear you, man. Which is funny. I'm ready to hear it. But he's not. He's not ready yet. He's ready for certain things. But what you should do is you should be reminded all the potential that you used to have, because that reminds you of the potential you presently have as well. The problem is we look back at our lives in these ways and we say, man, back in the day, 8th grade? Yeah, back in the day, I feel like I had things figured out way better. Well, of course you thought you did, because you didn't know what you didn't know. And now things are far less understood, because now you know that you don't know things, and you realize how complex and complicated things are. If you don't understand yourself, and by the way, I say that because it is exceedingly difficult to know yourself. You are incredibly complex and complicated. Just this idea of the reciprocity alone should tell you how complex you are. The fact that you take it in so much through osmosis should tell you how complex you are. These things, it's very difficult to understand yourself, but you want to understand the nature of the universe? And for a lot of people, it's like, no. Some people don't even want to understand themselves. And that's fine, because it's a difficult thing to suffer for. And so you choose to suffer for something else, which is fine. It's your life, it's your suffering. Pick it, that's your freedom. And that's a good thing, because once you've chosen it, you can embrace it, and then that's your how. So that's your why. Now you can find a how to get through it. But some people, it's like, well, you got to know yourself, because you have to know, because there's something in you that desires to know some things about the nature of the universe. We look up at the sky and we see things, and why is it that we spend so much time looking up at the sky? Well, because there's a homing beacon that's drawing us back to where we came from. Because there's something in you that's drawing you back to that place. Again, you're all made of stardust. We know this. So you're ready to receive it when you're able to, when you know that you're ready to receive it when you start receiving it. I guess that's what I'm saying. If you're a person who does a lot of this like upright posture and then looking around, you're not ready to receive it. Speed that. A person who does this, just speed that much up, and here's what you see. Person who's kind of looking around, just speed up, and you see a person shaking their head no. Nope, not ready to receive it. It's fine. It's frustrating, because you want them to receive it. And if you get easily frustrated by people who aren't ready to receive it, don't become a teacher. I wish I could just pour my head into your head. But you wouldn't receive it, because you're not ready. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. It'd be better if you were, because you'd be so much further along. But then you wouldn't be able to look back on your life and say, man, I wish I knew then what I know now. And that's going to be that's everyone's personal hell. Because someday you'll have children, or you'll be talking to youngsters somewhere, and you're going to want to share the wisdom with them, and they're going to be like, And I hope that when you do, you'll think back to this moment. Or maybe once in a while it'll get through. That'll shock you. Others?
Do you have things you wish you knew more?
Yes.
Like what?
Everything. I think this is an experiment that some of you will do when you're older. I do this now, sometimes I sit there and I go, man, if I knew at 16 what I know now, I'd be a monster. And then it occurs to me, yeah, you would be a monster. I remember one time I heard, I was with a friend of mine, and we were listening to this band play, and this husband and wife, I think they were incredible voices. And I turned to my friend and I said, man, if I had a voice like that, I'd conquer the world. And my friend said, maybe that's why you weren't given a voice like that. Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. Maybe the things that maybe it's a good thing that we don't know back then what we know now, because then we'd be incredibly dangerous. Because think about what that means. That means I want to take advantage. I want to overcome. I want to be able to outcompete people. I want to do things that I wasn't able to do at the time with an unfair advantage. That's really what we're saying. We just don't think of it that way. So yeah, I wish I knew then. I know now. But I wish I still wanted to do. I wish that my desires were still the same as they are now. Others? Happy Tuesday.